Okay. Well, look, let's get cracking. Thank you, everyone who's joined this call. Thank you for bearing with WebEx, which at its best is a wonderful medium, but does often give rise to sort of technical problems along the way. Don't forget to use the chat facility as an alternative to speaking, particularly if you're being muted, because we can collect all the stuff that's on the chat and use it in the follow-on. So I've got just a few orientation slides to start. Here we are. Thank you, Helen. And many thanks to Helen and the Horizons team for putting this show on, which I think is a great alternative to a face-to-face board meeting, and may in some ways be even better. We shall see. Anyway, so I'm going to briefly talk about what we're trying to do in this session, and give a kind of high-level overview of where we've got to. And of course, you've had the detailed text to read as well. Then Helen's also going to provide some initial stimulation to our discussions, and make us go through an interesting process that I think you'll find quite interactive and hopefully fun, as well as useful. And then by the end, we should be slightly clearer about the way forward. So, so that's the overview. Could I have the next slide, please? So what we're trying to do today is kind of take stock of where we've got to, take stock of what we're actually trying to do, think about and review the draft report, which I hope everybody's had a chance to read, and some of you have commented on already, to have a think about how we can improve it, to be clear so that we're all clear about the process for finalizing our outputs. If we have time, to have some discussion about how we will then communicate and disseminate the report, because while it is something that has been commissioned by Simon Stevens, it's not just for him. I think we should also take the opportunity to celebrate what we've been doing, and to thank everyone who's been involved. Thank you to everyone who has been involved in the PCB and beyond. And then I think there's something about making sure that we are all happy with what we're saying and committed to it, subject to any changes we might want to make in this call. So that's a kind of overview of what I hope we can get out of at least some of this. That might be ambitious for an hour and a half. This is what the discussion is not for. We can't completely rewrite the report from scratch. We haven't got time. So we have to build on what we've got. In this call, we're not trying to do detailed drafting, but if you have drafting changes that you think are important, then can you communicate them by email in the next couple of days, please, as soon as possible, really. And there's lots of other stuff we can talk about. This is a PCB board meeting, but it's one focused on our output for Simon. So wider issues about the PCB, its role, let's leave that for another day, if that's okay. So that's my overview. I can't now remember what comes next. Helen, you've got something.
I'm going to just take us through a kind of warm-up exercise, if that's okay, and get us all using the WebEx. So as Jeremy said, we want this to be to be a board meeting where we can all contribute and play our part. So we want to particularly use the chat box as a way of getting views across, having a conversation. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody is using the chat box. So if you go along the top right-hand side of your screen, there's a little symbol that's like a speech bubble. That's the chat box. So if you press on that, what you'll see at the bottom is a chat column. And what we'd like everyone to do is to just practice just sending a message. What we want you to do is we want you to send the messages to all participants. Okay, so if you look, there's a little drop-down box that says send to, and there's lots of different people that you could send that to. So we want you to pick on all participants. And would you like to send everybody? Can everybody send everybody else a message just so that we've had a practice with it? And just put it also, I'm just going to put hello from Coventry. Okay, what's happening? Yeah, here we are. Very good. Oh, that's very deep from Dalip, who says I chat, therefore I am. That's great. So so we can see there that most people are yeah, just about everybody is. So yeah, that's really good. Okay, so let's keep using that that chat box as we go along. So at this point, I'm going to hand over presenter rights to Paul because I need him to help me. So Paul is now the presenter. So Paul, if we can have the next slide.
Okay.
So just to kind of get us warmed up, what we're going to do to start with is talk about how are you feeling right now about the high impact actions. Now, on the do you want to explain how to find the drawing tools, Paul?
Okay. And good morning, everybody. As you can see from the slides Helen's put up, it's asking for your attitude. How are you feeling about what we're talking about? So to be able to annotate, on the top of your screen, you should see a bar nav options. So on the top left, underneath where it says Quick Start, you either have a pen symbol or a list of icons, and these are pointers, so they'll allow you to place icons on the screen. So you can indicate by clicking on the arrow whereabouts you fall, or you can use a pen mark, and that's it. I can see people are starting to put the indicators out now.
Yeah. Let's go. What should I put mine? Can we see if most people can have a go? That one there. Okay, most people have had a go. So what we can see from that is that one person's unconvinced or skeptical, and the most popular answer is I'm feeling positive, let's see how we can make this work. And a couple of people are cautiously hopeful that things can change. Okay, so Paul, can we have the next slide? So the other thing we want to do at the beginning is just on a scale of 1 to 10, how engaged do you feel in the high impact actions? And the next slide we're going to show you is a scale. And what we want you to do is to put your mark somewhere between 1, which is I feel completely unengaged, to 10, I feel highly engaged. So Paul, if we can have the next slide. And if you can use your pen tool or however you want to do it, will you draw how you're feeling? Okay, so how are we doing that? We've got quite a mix really. We've got 1, 2, we've got 3.5, and then we've got a number of people who are right at the end of 9 or 10, and that's really great because actually most people are contributing. So that's really good that we've been able to do that. So Paul, can you give me back the presenter's rights? And at this point, and we were going to hand back to Jeremy to give us an overview of where we are today.
Okay,
so,
thanks very much. Those of you who feel less engaged in this process, do use the opportunity in this session to become more engaged. And if there's anything that you think we can do to make it easier for you to engage, then provide that feedback. Would be really helpful using the chat facility or by other means. We often ask that question of National Voices members: how engaged do you feel in our work? And those who are less engaged often say, we'd love to be more engaged, but we just don't have the time to be. So, but sometimes it's things that we can do to make it easier. So, coming back to the success criteria, these are a reflection of what came out of the original commission from Simon and Stevens. It should be fairly familiar to us, because we've been trying to use those criteria as a way of framing the entire exercise. The focus on pinch points for the system, but also pinch points for people. The focus on saying things that actually have practical use and can be built into the current system of reform. So those are the criteria we set for our work. In the next slide, I've suggested some other things that I think have come up during the course of the exercise. So I think one of the success criteria is that when we've produced our final piece of work, it doesn't just disappear into a black hole, which could easily happen. So there is something about what do we do to make sure this has energy and momentum that lives beyond a piece of paper that goes to Simon Stevens. Anu Singh, at an earlier point in a conversation I had with her, made a very, I thought, interesting observation about how this exercise could be seen as successful if it is successful, and it would be if it both met and challenged Simon Stevens' expectations, which I think is interesting. And I think it means saying things that are relevant to him, but also saying the things that we think have to be said. I think there's something about whetting Simon's appetite. In other words, that I would love him to be able to read this and say, that's really interesting, tell me more. So we don't want our report to be the final stage, in my view. I think we want it to be the first part of a continuing process. I think throughout this piece of work, we've been wrestling with the kind of balance between top-down and bottom-up, between formal mechanisms and levers and social movements and bottom-up. How do we get the best balance between that? Because I think getting that balance is important. And I think finally, this isn't all about Simon Stevens. He can't wave a magic wand and completely reform health and social care. So I think one of the success criteria, and it links to the not disappearing into a black hole point, is that what we produce needs to speak more widely, needs to resonate with all those who are seeking to make positive change in the health and social care system. Whether he's interested in or not, there's a wider audience for this piece of work. So those are their personal thoughts, really, about what would constitute success. And you'll have your own views, I think. So I think what happens next is, do I have another slide? I do, yes. So this is a high-level summary of what we're saying. There's an awful lot of stuff happening on Chapter 2, but it needs energy and drive. It's not well aligned enough. It needs rocket fuel behind it, as somebody said in the workshop we had at NCVO a few days ago. We've identified the lack of a universal offer for people with long-term conditions. There are lots of different things going on, but they don't add up to a universal, comprehensive, systematic offer. And there's an opportunity to champion that in this report. Personalised care and support planning, a kind of bedrock of identifying what matters to people living with continuing conditions of one kind or another, or lots of kinds. It's essential underpinning, but it doesn't happen. It's countercultural. It's not part of the clinical culture. It's not part of the managerial culture. That's a real blocker. And incidentally, have we fully come up with an answer to that in our report for discussion, I think. And we've identified there's a whole lot of people out there doing stuff that's about person-centered, community-focused care and approaches to health. How can we empower them to go further? One way is for them to have a clearer signal and permission that this is the way the whole system is going, which feels absent at the moment. So those are some of the key messages from the report. And then our actions, we are saying, next slide please, thanks. We're not just going to deliver a random set of actions, we're saying they only make sense in terms of an overall framework of thinking and practice that is consonant with the overall 5-year forward view process. And we're saying we're not delivering you a magic wand. Here are some initial thoughts. We need to build on them, so you need to carry on working with the People Communities Board. But in the meantime, here is our best shot at some high-impact actions, and these are high-impact actions defined in terms of things that move the agenda on now, which go with the grain of what people are trying to do, which go with the grain of the policy that you, Simon Stevens, are actually in charge of, but which need greater support and energy and acceleration. And you need to carry on working in partnership with a whole range of partners, in the voluntary sector, in local government, in communities, to make them a reality. So this is all about emphasising that this is not the end game, this is the start. And then the next slide is a summary of those immediate high-impact actions, an action around signalling the priority, an action around doing something to address a really live and current and important pinch point around the lack of engagement in SDP areas, a high impact action around developing super demonstrators who can scale up person-centered, community-focused approaches, not starting with a blank sheet of paper, but working with people who are already trying to do this, but making it more systematic. Accelerating the work on person-centered metrics, which have equal parity of esteem with the system metrics. Developing success criteria for social prescribing, because it's already happening, or things that people call social prescribing already happening. Lots of energy around that, lots of practice around that. How much of it is good? How much of it is sustainable? How much of it is enabling the voluntary sector in particular to play the role that's a key underpinning of it? So developing those success criteria and principles that can be applied in local settings. And then earmarking more funding for social innovation, on which we can go into greater depth in this discussion, and there is greater detail in the report. And Helen, you've very kindly been adding some extra thoughts about how we describe what needs to happen in relation to innovation and change and social movement and communities of practice, which you might want to say something about a bit later on. So that's a kind of very, very high-level summary of some of the key messages that we're trying to get across in this report. So, is there a next slide?
Let's just... No.
No, we're on to you now, Helen.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, would it be helpful just to kind of get before we kind of go on and talk about it and put our views across? Should we just unmute everybody and just, in a sense, I think what this section should be, because there's going to be loads of opportunities on this session to kind of put our own views across, and to keep contributing. But are there any specific questions that anybody would like to ask at this stage? And what we've done is that can we unmute everybody, Paul? And then, if anybody wants to ask anything specific at this stage, do you want to put your hand up? And your electronic hand is if you click onto participants, and there's underneath all the names there's a bar, and you can raise your hand. Anybody want to ask anything, or just ask it any? Don't worry about raising your hand. Just ask it anyway. We've unmuted everybody.
There's a couple of questions that have been posted in the chat, Helen.
Yeah, okay, and Caroline's got her hand up. So Caroline, do you want to go first, and we'll see what we've got in the chat?
Yeah, hi everybody. I just put a question. Well, I know it's a bit late in the day, and I apologise to colleagues for that, but I do think we're a bit at risk of kind of missing an elephant in the room in the report, which is that it'd be very easy for NHS England to assume the voluntary sector is the voluntary sector and that's it. But it really, really isn't at the moment, because what we know is that all the issues that are bearing down on them and councils, you know, when those things sneeze, we catch a cold. What I'm trying to say is that basically a lot of the local voluntary sector is shrinking quite quickly, and that's largely because councils have stopped paying core costs. And that raises a question, I think, for NHS England about what its role and responsibility is in that regard. I mean, some of these schemes that I've been hearing about where people are working with NHS England, actually the voluntary sector is subsidising them. They're putting their own money in to make them work because the funding isn't smart enough to take account of core costs and all that sort of stuff. So actually, there's a big question mark there about the future. If there's a desire to get the sector more involved, something's got to give around that, because there won't be a sector to engage with if we're not careful. Yeah.
Okay, should we just kind of take points at the moment? Is that if that's okay?
Yeah, so Helen, it's Duncan here. Sorry, I still can't get in on the WebEx, so I'm really sorry about that. So I'm refusing to comply, or I'm unable to comply.
You are unable, yeah.
With so I'd just like to sort of reinforce sort of Caroline's point there. And I don't know if people picked up the Lloyd's Foundation report last week on commissioning, the crisis in commissioning, and the impact that that's having on, I mean, that's the title of the report, on voluntary and community sector organisations with, you know, revenue of under £1 million. I mean, there are some real issues there about actually the absolutely essential importance of not only the investment in the voluntary and community sector at that level, but also actually how commissioning is still procurement, and it's not characterised by collaboration, and it's not characterised by partnership. And I guess that's something we very much need to reflect. I mean, in this, I mean, that there is a crisis unfolding locally in terms of the capacity of the sector. And if people haven't seen that report and Paul Street's introduction to it, I would urge them to see it, because I think it may be helpful for us to reflect on it when we're putting the finishing touches to this proposal to Simon. If we don't, then I guess our colleagues out wide in the sector will say, well, you know, why haven't you acknowledged these issues and reflected them?
Okay, and Colin's got his hand up.
Yes, it's going to be a different point. I'm on the board of a Hampshire Action, so an infrastructure body, so I do get those points as well that have just been made by everybody else. But what I was, after having read the stuff and gone through it, I'm still finding it difficult to put myself in the place of Simon Stevenson to say, what exactly are we offering and asking? And I know that's frustrating, that must be frustrating to land with you, but I just find it hard to get through this dense load of stuff and be clear about what we're actually trying to get him to grab and to hold for us, because we just seem to be throwing issues at him with, yes, we can provide some of the solutions, and then the background is, but we're in a context of we've got no partnerships on the ground, are being cut and everything else. So we seem to be landing with all of our problems and giving him a range of things to which to look at. So I'm still finding the high impact actions bit difficult to grasp.
Okay. Thanks for that. And Neil is next. Hi Neil, can you hear me? No. Okay. And I think Sarah's keeping an eye on the chat box as well. So we'll Sarah, we'll come back to you every now and again if that's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Yeah,
hi Neil.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry about that, Helen. Yeah, I wanted to agree initially with the point that Caroline made, and really Colin and Duncan have backed it up. I think there's a real issue about accepting that there's a, I think there's a comment in the report about social prescribing gaining some momentum. We know that a number of social prescribing projects are actually funded for 1 year. They're basically pilots, and the funding might well disappear. And I think we need to reflect that and recognise the pressures that local voluntary organisations are under. And I think the other thing we need to address, and I think it comes back to Caroline's initial point, there are places where the voluntary sector, and they're often places, some of the most deprived parts of the country, where the local voluntary sector is extremely weak, has little or no infrastructure to support it, and if it wanted to engage in some of the activities we're talking about, I question where the capacity would come from. So there's a real challenge there to NHS England, to kind of what Warren's been saying in the chat, to actually put some effort and resources into actually supporting the local sector, because otherwise I think in some places CCGs, SCPs will look to work with the local voluntary sector, and there won't be much there to work with. That's me done.
Yep, thank you. And thanks, Neil. And Julep is next.
All right. I think there's some really good thinking. It is quite difficult to wade through. So I kind of read it last week, still trying to kind of process it, I guess. And I think when it's presented, it just needs to be a lot sharper. So I like this slide that's up at the moment, because it kind of distills the key points. I think one of the things that we need to do is distinguish between high impact actions and quick wins, because I don't think they're the same thing. And I think that quite often NHS England in the sort of Vanguard programme is looking for quick wins, or is trying to move at a pace that's too quick to do proper co-production. So I think some of the stuff that we're talking about is high impact, but it isn't quick. And I think that it's probably worth thinking about what are the things that we can do now, straight away, working with super demonstrators or whatever, and what are the things that are high impact, but will take a bit of time and might take some resource. So Macmilla's been working on developing a quality of life metric in cancer. That's not an easy thing to do, because it's not just about what is the measure that patients, communities want, but what is it that can be collected? What is it that works? So really, it's quite difficult, and I don't think that's a quick win, but it's high impact potentially. So I think we just need to do a bit of filtering about what the things we think are the right things to do, but might take a bit longer, might require additional capacity in the system. Stuff around kind of long-term condition management. One of the reasons it's not that people don't know how to do it. It doesn't work because people's community matron caseloads are too big. So it's hard to do when you've got stretched capacity. So I think there's just some filtering we need to do around where resources are needed, what can be done quickly, and what things are longer term.
Yeah, great. And we're getting. I mean, what's great about this is that we're getting all sorts of reactions in the chat box to this. And Sarah, like I say, has got the unenviable job. So Sarah, can we come back to you in a few minutes?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Is that all right? Just give you time to sort that. So what we were going to propose to do now, okay, was to look at this and look at the report and the letter from a lot of different perspectives. And what we're proposing to do is to use these 6 thinking hats. Okay, and this is a kind of evidence-based approach, and what it helps us to do is, when we're looking at something and we're evaluating it or reviewing it, it makes us look at it from 6 different perspectives. So what we were hoping that we could do now is just go through each of these perspectives and just collectively brainstorm how we feel about this report from these different viewpoints. Because otherwise, what happens is if you don't do this kind of process, we end up focusing on all the things about it that are negative and wrong, and we miss some of the other opportunities. So actually going through this sort of systematic process can be incredibly helpful. So I just want to check that everybody's happy to do this. And again, what we'll do is we'll keep everybody unmuted, so either stuff in the chat box or speak out. And by the way, if you've had your hand up, will you put your hand down again, because your hand will stay up, and I don't know whether you that means you want to speak, or whether it's put it down from last time. So so can everybody put their hand down? And again, if you've got an exclamation mark, can you put your exclamation mark down? Is that as well? Okay. So let's go into this. Okay. So let's start off with the yellow hat, which is all the positive things. So so the kind of questions that we'd ask here is what's really good about this proposal for high impact actions, what's likely to work, and what values underpin the proposal. So would anybody like to speak or put stuff in the chat box around this? Because we've talked a lot in the kind of conversation that we had before about the things that were kind of missing or were not strong enough. But you know, what are the good things about this? Anybody like to say anything? Otherwise, go on, Christine, say something.
I think that what is very positive is the fact that I think most of our higher actions and some of the narrative is actually looking to build on what's already there and not come out with something completely different. And I think that should be a selling point, because I think too often some of the things that come out of the project and then they stop after 6 months or 12 months. And I think us acknowledging that actually there is a lot of great stuff happening. And I think vanguards, I think we're really close to aligning with the vanguards who are doing and have as a mandate to do a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve too.
Thanks for that, Christine. Caroline, your hand's still up. Would you like to say some things that you think are positive?
It's a mistake, sorry.
Oh, but you can anyway. Go on.
But what I would say is I think one of the most positive things about it is it is positive. It's optimistic. It engages it sort of travels with optimism, and I think that at a time like this, that's quite valuable. I think the only trick there is to make sure that it's realistic, and so, you know, I think that's the money point really. It's just because what we don't want to do is to overpromise and underdeliver. But I think the fact that it kind of it shows that we all think that things can be better than they are, but we can't do it all on our own. So I think the sort of spirit and tone of it's very helpful.
Can I be heard still?
Yep.
I love the question about values, because the whole thing is underpinned by values, and part of this exercise, I think, is an appeal to the values of those at national level to put their money where their mouth is, really, because at the moment there's a kind of misalignment between practice and value. So I think that's the emphasis we put on value, valuing what matters to people is really important in order to keep us realising the value programme. The other thing that I think is really good about this opportunity is it is an opportunity to speak truth to power in a public way and say things that I think haven't been said in a document for a while, if ever. In fact, when documents to do with person-centred care tend to get published, they're often government documents or official documents of one kind or another. This is a non-official document, really. This is a bunch of semi-outsiders saying, look, there's some really important stuff that still needs to happen. So I think that's potentially really powerful.
Thanks, Jeremy. So we can see that Warren and Duleep have put a comment in the chat box, which is fantastic. And could everybody else, you know, if you feel so inclined, have a go at putting a yellow comment. And can you just put yellow and then put what your comment is? And while we do that, let's just hear from Sarah. Just Sarah, in terms of some of the impossible task of trying to summarise what's coming out of the chat box so far. How are we doing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion about some of Warren's points about what we do about sort of supporting the local BCSE and empowering them. In particular, how will they be supported to influence STPs? And there is some and I think also drawing in from Caroline's point, which is also in there about the pressures on the local voluntary sector, that there is a section on that. So obviously, if anybody's got any sort of specific ways to strengthen that, do let us know. But there is a section on the need for support for supporting commissioners and helping them identify how to carve out money for the local voluntary sector and strengthen that. There is it's sort of in relation to the question about what's quick wins. Point from Caroline about from Christine about how NHS England's really supporting partnership working and co-production could be a really high impact action that's sort of quite a quick win. There's also support for the focus on self-management and social subscribing from DLEAP, and saying it's a good framework, not a set of magic policy bullets, and people are sort of adding in their yellow comments sort of as I'm speaking. So giving a voice to the voluntary sector and really put some meat onto the bones of Chapter 2 is what is in there.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And we're getting a few more comments now on yellow. And Warren says he's being drummed to death, and I think that's people putting stuff in the chat box. So apologise for that. So should we just move on to the next one, which is the black hat? So and again, it's the opposite. So it's like, what's wrong with it? And we've talked a lot about some of the gaps, so we shouldn't maybe talk about the same things again. But what aspects of it do you think are unlikely to work? And again, if you could put some things in the chat box and just put black. And again, if we can take the conversation on, if we can pick on things here that we haven't talked about already. Anybody like to add to the conversation? We're all gone quiet. Can I pick on like Jeremy or Don? Just in terms of where it's at the moment. What do you think? Given that in terms of the kind of the massive contribution that you've both made to this, what do you think's wrong with it? And what do you think are the worst aspects? Why is it unlikely to work, or aspects of it unlikely to work?
Okay, I'll say something.
Yep.
I put in the chat box. Simon says, "So what?" So it seems to me we haven't neutralised the risk that will just be another report that gathers dust on a shelf, if it even gets onto a shelf. So I think there's a paradox here. If we say stuff that's radically challenging and different to what the status quo is doing, then there's a risk that the overall reaction will be, we just haven't got the bandwidth or money to focus on what you're saying. We know it's important, but frankly, we've got more important fish to fry at the moment. We're trying to keep a system going that's underfunded. We're trying to do STPs. So, go and do stuff locally, but we're not interested. If we say stuff that goes with the grain, which I think is what we're trying to do, here's what you're already doing that's really fantastic, but you could do it better. The smarter we are at positioning it around building on the best of what Simon essentially has already commissioned, the greater the danger. He says, "So what? We're already doing this, so what value have you added?" And then the third point is the one that I think has been made very strongly by a number of participants, which is this is all too focused on national bodies and it's too top-down. What do you say about bottom-up? I think there's a genuine risks and that have been built in, I think, to the exercise from the outset.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you, Jeremy, for that. Anybody else want to say anything? Again, it'd be great if you could just put some things in the box. We're getting a few things here, and again, we'll get Sarah to synthesise those in a minute. I think we'll go through two more, and then we'll ask Sarah. Okay. The next one is the green one, and the green hat, and this is about creativity, and it says, like, what are the possibilities, and what are some of the things that we can do? And we've talked about, a number of the problems and challenges. How can we overcome these negative issues and reinforce the yellow positive ones? And what new ideas or new thinking do we have? So, given some of the things that we talked about and some of these black hat issues around, it feels too top down, some of you have said. What are some of the ways that we can, overcome that or balance that? And again, if you can put some stuff in the chat box and put green. Anybody got any views on that?
I'm going to say something that I've already put in the chat box, but I think it goes back to something I said at the introduction, that if this is a report that speaks to a wider audience, it potentially have more impact. So if it's, going back to Warren's very good challenge about this is too top down, if we are able to couch it in ways that people in the local voluntary sector, in local services, like commissioners and so forth, fantastic. This helps and empowers us. This is useful material that reinforces everything we're trying to do. Then we are doing something to help what happens at grassroots level, even if it's ignored at national level. So I think there is an opportunity there, and it's about making sure that this is not just a report to Simon Stevens.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Should we just ask one more person? Neil's got his hand up. Great. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Helen. Just along similar lines, really. I think if we're going to address that issue of making it feel a bit more bottom up, then it seems to me. I mean, this is, as Jeremy said, this is just a report to Simon Stevens. It's about then what happens next, and I think that's got to be about engaging the local VCS, rather as Warren's been suggesting in his chat. Our next phase has got to be, what are we going to do to engage the local VCS in co-producing solutions and actually helping them where they're challenged and where they're not necessarily getting the support, to open up the conversation with the system to make some change. And I think that's what we've got to think through. How are we going to offer to support them with that?
Yeah. Thanks, Neil, so much for that. What I think we'll do is we'll pause there. So, Sarah, tell us about, we're kind of halfway through the hats now. So can you kind of give us a summary of what we're seeing?
Yes. So, sorry, I had it a second ago and I moved. So a lot of the points around black are ones that people have said. One issue about from Colin Brown, there's not a clear sense of what the outcomes will be for people, so really sort of showing, I guess, what that change will be. Also Neil's concern about where is the local commitment to this. So I think that's sort of that point about how we think about working with and supporting the local VCS beyond this. One, either black or green, is there a timetable attached? And so to demonstrate where and when you can get the quick wins, linking back to Dulich's point earlier, a risk that the length and depth of the whole report could distract from the key messages, so really needing a focus on that short summary / exec report that can sort of be more eye-catching and sort of easy to access. A great offer from Warren to host a session on the local partnership, which could be really helpful. One concern about where's the cash to make this work, and are we going to be able to access that? We need to, Green needs to acknowledge from Christine that the top down and bottom up need to happen at the same time, so it can't be just one waiting for the other. And if there's not that top down support, any sort of change at the local areas won't be sustained or wither away, and I guess that links to the sort of social prescribing 1-year contract stuff that actually there needs to be more continuous support there. And finally, it's not clear how costly or difficult it is to roll out some of these actions. So lack of capacity in the system might make that more difficult.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that, Sarah. Let's keep going. Okay. Next one is the red hat, and the red hat is about feelings. And you know, often we don't talk about feelings, but you know, we need to kind of go in that space. So, what's your feelings about this proposal, and how does it make you feel, and what does your intuition tell you about it? Anybody want to discuss their feelings? Julep, you've got your hand up still. So,
yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want to tell us about your feelings?
My feelings. Well, I think the main thing I'm thinking is that these are good ideas, but need a lot more work on them. And I think, it was a point I made at the workshop the other week, which is, you know, we could try and rush this through to meet some kind of NHS England kind of business planning deadlines, but it feels like we need to think through some of this stuff properly and maybe convene some kind of expert workshops so that we can work out what would be the enablers and what will be the barriers. Why is this, you know, what does this stuff cost? How do you spread it? What would stop it being spread? You know, things that work in one area might not be replicable or scalable. So there just feels like there's another step after this to do some accelerated thinking around some of the key proposals.
Thank you for that, Julep. And Christine is next.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel mixed. On the one hand, I think I feel quite encouraged and I think the work that's been done is really good, and I think there's some really good points there. I suppose where I feel slightly anxious is actually is the wording going to land? Is it going to land with Simon Stevens? Think, do you know what? That's exactly what we need. Because I think in my time around the NHS, you know, I found sometimes that words, just the odd little word can signal some connection. So I just hope we've got some keys there that will resound with him, because it was slightly differently to Julep, because I think it's that a lot of stuff going on that we can actually work in, and I don't think us as a board have to think of all the answers. I think the whole point is that we're there with other people and lead in some ways of things that they're missing. So I don't think we need time to sit down and work on it. We need the support and the priority that only Simon Stevens and the NHS England board can give. So actually that will open doors that people have to listen to what we're saying and work with the stuff that they've already got.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that, Christine. It's really great to get a contribution. And Vicky has got some hands, but I don't know if they're clapping hands. So, Vicky, good, she wants to say something. So, Vicky, do you want to unmute yourself and contribute? That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, those clapping hands have been there for ages. From I think from like the yellow hat, I just couldn't get.
Oh, sorry. I think it was because yeah. Sorry. Okay.
I was saying about with the I put in the chat box about the with the red hat on is it feels to me that we're not quite there yet. We haven't quite worked out how all of the bits of the jigsaw fit together in terms of telling the overall story. So for me, it's always about kind of what's the picture that you're supposed to be painting, and I'm not quite sure that we've got that, and we need to make sure that bit lands probably above all else, above the detail in terms of selling it in and people kind of really getting it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. It would be really great if we could get one or two red hat comments in the box, because we haven't got any at the moment.
No, we do have a few, Helen.
Do we? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they haven't come through to me yet. Aha. Very good. Yeah, they've just arrived. Excellent. Okay, fantastic. So, let's go on now to the white hat. And the white hat is about facts. So is the proposal objective? Have we got all the facts that we need? Have we got enough data? And is the data right? So what do you think about the data in the report? Is there enough of it? Is it right? What do we need? Anybody wants? Do you know, Don? Can I pick on you? Sorry, not pick on you. Can I volunteer you? Just because you said something earlier in the chat box about data. and you know, needing to illustrate some of the points with a particular kind of data. What do you think about this?
That point was basically just to say that, you know, there is data to back up the earlier what's happening in the voluntary sector locally, the trends of funding and also restrictions of independent voice due to the sort of forms of contracting. You know, I mean, you know, we can still find additional kind of references and data to put in with the actions. In relation to what Dilip was saying about, you know, costings, I mean, some of the proposals that we have in the background to this do have costings around them. So a lot of the things that people actually put into us at an early stage do have costings. But if we start kind of bundling them, all of those up and throwing them at NHS England, then it starts to look like, you know, a lot of demands for money that are hard to sort through. Whereas I think what we need to be doing is a process of kind of focus and prioritisation with NHS England about what is going to be done on this agenda. And then we can start to put kind of costs and timelines against some of that, using information, you know, some of which we already have.
Yeah, thanks for that, Don. Does anybody know of any or got a perspective around any data that should be in the report that isn't in it now?
I've lost you.
You haven't?
You haven't? No. No, we can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay, the other thing I should say is
go on, go for it, Don. Yeah.
You know, we are partly kind of trying to sort of ride on the back of realising the values work. Yeah. So if you want data about costs and benefits, individual outcomes and wider social outcomes, how commissioners can look at supporting at least some of these interventions. You know, there's a lot there in realising the value. We can't just sort of repeat it all in another. But our report is too long already, and I'd be concerned about trying to put too much in.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. I'm going to move on to the last one now, and then at the end of this, just to give notice to Sarah that we're going to ask you, Sarah, to give us a synopsis of what we've got in the chat box. So the last one is the blue. That's okay. The last one is the blue one, and the blue one is about, you know, control. So how do we keep control of this overall? What's the focus? How do we summarise this? What's our action plan? You know, what are any of the kind of control issues that we need to think about with regards to the proposal? I'm a little bit worried because quite a lot of people have got exclamation marks rather than hands, and I'm just wondering whether some of these people wanted to actually meant to put their hand up. So I'm going to ask Andrew first. Andrew, do you want to say anything? It's gone. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Oh no, that might be an error on my part. Sorry, struggling with the text slightly.
Yeah, don't worry. Do you want to make any contributions or say anything?
No, I'm slightly lurking in the background just to get up to speed with the project and the findings, and just get across everyone's different views on it with a view to when or if it would be published. Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone. It's been really useful to listen in.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on the call, Andrew.
I should just mention, so it's Jeremy here, that Andrew is National Voice's head of communications. So and that's why he's listening in, because there is and will be a comms angle to this that may not explore in this discussion.
Yeah. What does anybody think are any of the control issues that we need to be thinking about at this stage?
Can I offer?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it, Jeremy.
So clearly, we can't. I mean, this discussion has been incredibly rich and helpful, and has reinforced both some of the strengths and weaknesses and risks around this project. What we can't do, I think, in the light of the discussion, is completely change the report. I actually think we've got some really good material and a really good argument, and I think so part of the control is to be as clever as we can be about absorbing the key points of this discussion in the final version of the report. Part of it, I think, is to go with the energy of Dalik's interventions in particular, to emphasise that this is an opening gambit, and if Simon wants to get the full value out of this exercise, he needs to see it as stage 1, and that there has to be a stage 2. Otherwise, the energy will have been wasted because we're not going to pin everything down by Friday. And then I think the third bit about the action plan is we do need to suggest in our report a proper process for taking this forward, which does some of the work that Dalik, I think, has been describing around an accelerated, sophisticated thinking process that develops processes for taking all this forward. We just don't have time to do that. So I think rather than panicking and trying to get everything nailed down, I think we have to be clever and say, this is emerging stuff and it needs work.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy, for that. So should we ask Sarah at this point to give us a bit more of a synopsis of what we're seeing in the chat box?
Yeah, sure. So looking at some of the red comments that people made, there's some Warren's very, very positive, but there's obviously that sort of delivery gap issue that he's raised. Concern that from Vicky that not quite got the story right yet, and how it all weaves together. So, basically, will people really get it? Some anxiety because if this is ignored, it potentially sets us all back, and there are some issues around whether people that we need on board at NHS England will be on board and can be convinced. There's a real opportunity, but it doesn't end with the report to Simon. I think that whole issue about we really need a collective action plan. We have sort of mixed but hopeful. We have comments about needs for snappy infographics. I've commented that we're trying to get some of that stuff in there, but obviously for getting stuff to Simon in the next week, that is a bit of a challenge. We also have some more discussion about we need to really think about what the next steps are and what the impact is on the work plan that the board developed earlier in the year, and how we will need to change that to reflect what we've been learning and what we've achieved. So there's so much, everybody's putting loads in, so I'm just trying to sort of skim what's coming up. On Blue, we need to think about how this lands with Simon, think about what we can do now, but sort of a suggestion from Juliet that we sort of talk about commissioning a 6 to 9 month project to really accelerate thinking on this and how we can get it done. But also from Neil, we shouldn't get too hung up around control as long as things are moving locally, but we need a vision of what will change.
Yeah, thank you. So, wow, I think really good, and thank you for sticking with that framework, and I think we did get some really good different perspectives by going around those 6 ways of doing things, and please keep putting things into the mix and into the chat. So what we're proposing to do now is something interesting, which is that we are going to go into some breakout rooms. So what we're going to do for about 10 minutes is we're going to allocate everybody into one of 4 rooms, and basically it's like a WebEx within a WebEx. So we'll unmute everybody, and what we want you to do is, and this is the topic, is there anything that's not been said yet, any outstanding urgent issues? Okay, and if you could have somebody in your group, if you can have that conversation for about 10 minutes just to say, what hasn't been said yet, and then come back to the bigger group after about 10 minutes. We'll see how everyone's doing. And then what we'd like, we'll just hear back from each of the 4 groups. And if somebody can put it in the chat box as well, that would be fantastic. So let me just show you how this is going to work. And my colleague Paul is going to help me. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to put everybody into groups. So what will happen is, just before I do this, somebody in your group, some of the groups are smaller and some of them are bigger. Somebody's going to be given the role of presenter, okay, which means that you'll get a blue and green ball. If you get the presenter, a message is going to appear in the middle of your screen to ask you to start that session, and just click it to start the session. And then if you're somebody else, a message will pop up in the middle of your screen asking if you want to join the session, and click to accept this. So whatever it asks you to do, just say yes. And once you're in that room, we'll unmute everybody and you'll be able to have your conversation. Okay. Is everybody happy about doing this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start. So, hi. Is everybody else back now?
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, welcome back. And again, if somebody can put in the chat box and what you were saying, and we'll just quickly go round each group while we're doing that. So, let's have a look. So should we say that the breakout session that was Neil and Emma and Caroline? Do you just want to just in a sentence or two, what did you come up with?
Okay, we came up with the report at the moment looks like a lot of things that are already going on, which is true, I think. So we need to frame it in terms of there is good stuff going on already. Some of it's very fragile because it's not sustainably funded, and some of it isn't funded at all. It's just going on almost in a piecemeal fashion. So it's got to be about putting some real energy into those things and making them happen on a more consistent basis. And the other one, the other key point, I think, was we need to frame the report in terms of not just telling NHS England what it should be doing, but how we can help it. And I think, sort of added to that, where we think there are levers that NHS England could pull to encourage some of this stuff to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So can I just say in response to that, this time again, sure, that you know, if you know specific levers that could be pulled, if you're talking about things like contracts, sequins, tariffs, or whatever, and you know you have a suggested mechanism, then please let us know in the next 24 hours. We have a general point about looking at the hard levers, but we don't have specifics. So if you have some specifics, let us know.
Well, the specific thing that struck me is around the insurance framework, but I'll send something in about that.
Around the what, sorry?
DCG insurance framework.
Okay, yeah. Which already has what? How many items in it?
Oh, hundreds. Yeah. But I think it's about highlighting, identifying those which we think they should give, and they should give a bit more attention to.
Okay. Well, if you can suggest a way of doing that, it'd be great.
Yeah.
And John, as you've already got the floor, do you just want to tell us really quickly what your group came up with?
Yeah, it was just a single point about you know, if this stuff is so good, why hasn't it happened already? And that we, you know, there are barriers in the way of spreading that we aren't analysing in this phase. So if we do get some of this accepted, we will need a second phase to look at what are those barriers and how do we get beyond them.
Yeah.
I think Delete's just giving an example in the chat box.
Fantastic. That's really great. And Vicky, just put in the chat box from Christine Collin and Vicky. So do you want to just tell us your points, Vicky?
Yeah, so it was basically thinking about how we best use the kind of the letter and the exec summary, probably more than the full report, to kind of really address those kind of connections with the to-do list for NHS England and the other ALBs in a more explicit way, so that making that really explicit connection to the vanguards or the must-dos or the STPs or kind of social care crisis or A&E, and how actually by doing what's in the report or by doing what we're recommending, it can help deliver chapter 2, but also help with some of those other problems. So just it's a presentation point, and then we did talk a little bit about kind of then how you then look at what's in the content of the report and whether some of that is moved to kind of appendix, or it's about how it's a presentation point, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And the fourth group was Joe. So Joe, or somebody in your group, do you want to just give us a flavour?
Yeah. Just me and Warren in Manchester and Liverpool.
I can't hear that. You'll have
it's
to
quite, Joe, it's quite hard for you to hear you.
Oh, really? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just about. And hi, Joe. Hi.
Sorry. Okay. So it was just Warren and I, and Warren was explaining what's going on in Manchester and Liverpool. Some concern about saying the same things that are already being said, need for different conversations, and the VCSE sector taking more power, taking more control. So we talk about the top and the bottom, but it feels wrong to me to talk about top and bottom because it doesn't change the power relationship. We should be, from my point of view, be in partnership. Is that fair, Warren?
I think so. I think we didn't have much time because we could connect for a long time. I think the point earlier about the voluntary sector, not, being in trouble and falling apart, needs to be reflected. I think on the other side, the public sector partners locally, they're partly falling apart and partly reforming into new structures. So there's a bit where a lot of our delivery model is about tweaking what's currently being done as if there wasn't massive shifts in how things are operating locally. So there's a bit where, unless we anticipate a changing structure, we won't have a delivery model that fits in. So my point about that bottom-up stuff is you need to create the connections locally that can anticipate those shifts and drive some of those changes that create new relationships and partnerships with public sector agencies, which is what we've seen in Greater Manchester.
Thanks, Warren. So we're just about on time now, and at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy. Just having had such a kind of rich conversation and discussion and so much chat. How do we make sense of this, Jeremy, and what does it mean? And particularly what does it mean in terms of the commitments that the PCB might make, PCB members both locally and nationally around this?
Thanks, Helen. Well, I won't be able to do justice to the whole discussion, obviously, but what I've taken out of it is, first of all, a strong sense of validation of what we're saying. I think we're saying that our material, if you like, our arguments, our facts are right and need to be presented. A lot of the discussion has been around, and not only that, but I think we feel a sense of commitment to the principles and arguments. So I think there is something about following through on that commitment, and most of the members of the PCB are essentially doing that in real time. I mean, Warren talking about the role of the local voluntary sector in Manchester is a good example. Colin and the Red Cross and the work they're doing on social isolation, which was announced the other day. So there's lots of, we are able to say, we've already made an offer, we're making the offer now, we're getting on and doing it. Which I think is really strong. Perhaps we can come back to the issue of commitment at the end of my comments. But just, so I think we've got the right arguments. I think there's been a big thread of discussion around how we're presenting them in the best possible way. So there clearly is something around having a snappier summary, which tells our story, highlights the key messages, but also links it to the key must-dos that are preoccupying NHS England. I think a number of you made that comment. I think we do need to reflect the extent to which the voluntary sector is under huge pressure and is being cut and is disappearing in many places. I think we need to be clear about the distinction between high impact actions and quick wins. I think that's a very strong point made. We need to be really strong about how the local voluntary and community sector is supported. We need a delivery plan, but it doesn't necessarily need to be our delivery plan now. I think it needs to be something about what the next stage of the process is to deliver the actions that are needed. And I think we need to not just be saying this is what our next thing we need to do, but be saying, and this is how we, the PCB, and our networks can help. Those are some of the key messages that I took out. Have I answered your question, Helen, about commitment?
Yeah. So just in terms of, obviously the the report is due to be submitted in a few days, and just thinking about how we as PCB members are kind of showing our own commitment to this in terms of the actions that we're all taking, and because if we don't make a commitment in terms of the things that we're going to do, then the thing that we were worrying about, when we're talking about the black hat, was that it will just be a report. And I think, the people that can most make this not a report is us as members of the PCB. So I just think it's worth us thinking about, our commitment to this and our commitment to action as well.
I think we need to reflect that sense of offer and commitment in the report itself. And certainly in saying, you need us to carry on working on this, and we're offering to help in co-producing some of the next steps. But I think beyond that, we've only got a very, very short time to finalise the drafting. So I think in practice we're going to have to be very focused on getting a final version produced in double quick time.
Okay. So Jeremy, that's bringing us to the end of our hour and a half session this morning. I just think that went incredibly quickly, and I think what we should maybe do is as we're leaving now, can we all kind of put a comment and reflection in the box? And I think if this can be around things that we need to do positively to take us to the next step, I think that would be really helpful. And Jeremy, just in terms of sort of closing words and where we go from here and what happens next, tell us about that.
Thank you for all your contributions today and throughout the process. I might just very briefly hand over to Don, because he's our chief writer.
Yeah.
And he might just want to briefly reflect on what he thinks this discussion, the impact it will have on the final days of drafting.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Don?
Yeah, and Don's unmuted.
Yeah, thanks. I think we've heard a lot today about presentation, and obviously that's stuff that we have to get right over the next 2 or 3 days. That's both in the covering letter stroke executive summary, which is the bit that really has to be crisp on the presentation, but it's also all through the report. One of the things I intend to do with the final draft is find some kind of device, graphical device, or text box or otherwise, so that wherever possible, against one of the actions that we're suggesting for others, we have an offer from the VCSE, so that we really bring that out. There's always a reciprocal offer on our side, as it were. I think one of the things that has been, that is a challenge with this drafting is that the PCB is one manifestation of VCSE voices working with others from other organisations. We can, in a sense, only make sort of generic offers, but let's at least try and pull those up a bit more in the drafting. I'm taking quite seriously the feeling that Warren and Neil and one or two others have come in with, that there isn't enough emphasis on the getting things right for the VCSE to be a driving force, particularly locally. I think I thought that we had captured quite a lot of that, and that the recommendations around skilling up commissioners to work better with VCSE, modelling co-production, creating social innovation fund, etc., went quite a long way towards that. But I shall look at what further we can add to that as we go. In terms of the very practical next steps, we're down to days and hours now. The framing of immediate offers that you've seen on at the top of the current draft may change a little bit. We're going to be having meetings today to see whether we've pulled the right list out of the overall report, whether that list helps this to land with Simon and others, and whether there might be some adjustment that's needed to that. So that's today, is just kind of looking at everything that's at the top of the report and in the covering letter today, is kind of setting our stall out for the final drafting, and then we have 2 days of drafting to the end of Wednesday for everything that goes in the package, which is the letter, the full report, the annexes. And there won't be much done at this end on Thursday. There might be a little bit, but our colleague Holly is also working on the sort of design presentation of the piece, and then Friday it goes in. So really, this has been almost your last chance to say something, but you have a last 24 hours. If there's something really chunky or absolutely key that you need to get to us, please do it in the next 24 hours.
Thank you very much for that, Don. Yeah. We probably need to wind up, don't we, Helen?
Yes.
Slightly over. Yeah.
I think what's lovely, Jeremy, is just the kind of final comments that colleagues are putting in the chat box. I think they're really positive, committed, to this process. And once I had I got this slide around like being rejected and people saying no all the time, because when you're a change agent, that happens, and I had this quote on there, and somebody said, this is really innovative. Unfortunately, we can't support it because it's never been done before. And and it just kind of makes me feel, this whole process, it makes me feel like that. I mean, it is such new territory, but it's a big opportunity, and I really appreciate what National Voices colleagues are doing, and how well everybody's contributed today, and the kind of spirit in which everyone's contributed. So I think what we'll do is we'll have recorded the WebEx if people want to see it, and also we'll have a record of the chat box, and Sarah and I will catch up afterwards around what we send around to people, what will be helpful, the slides and the chat box and the recording.
Thank you very much, Helen, for hosting this and chairing it so masterfully.
Okay, so I think that's it. And Don's really clearly outlined the timescales and has told us what we can do and what we can't do. And I just say, to really wish the writing team well over the next 2 or 3 days. And I think, I completely agree in terms of, there's a lot of helpful stuff has come out today in terms of framing and focus, and it will be a better document because of it. So thanks everybody for taking part, and have a happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.